She whispered she couldn't even afford a coffee. And that's when everything changed. This isn't just a story about coffee. It's about dignity, kindness, and the way one small choice can flip an entire life around. Today, you're going to hear the story of a blind date that started with embarrassment and ended with something nobody expected. Stay tuned, because once you hear what happened at that little table by the window, you won't look at everyday kindness the same way again. It was a chilly evening, the kind where the windows fog up from the heat inside a cafe. A single dad, well-dressed in a white shirt, sat with his little daughter. The girl's hair was tied in a neat ponytail, and a small pink stuffed bunny sat on the table, almost like a silent companion. He wasn't here for business meetings or corporate deals like most people expected from someone with his title. He was here for something far simpler, a blind date. Now here's the thing about blind dates. They're unpredictable. Sometimes they turn into awkward small talk. Sometimes they end in ghosting. And once in a while, something deeper happens. Something that makes you pause and think about life itself. She walked in a few minutes later nervous, wearing a soft cream-colored cardigan over a light dress. She didn't look like someone who lived in luxury. She didn't try to pretend either. She walked in with her guard up, almost like she was expecting rejection before even sitting down. The man stood up slightly to greet her, the kind of gesture that tells you he was raised with manners. But before she could even sit down, she whispered something, almost like she didn't want the walls to hear it. "I can't afford coffee." That was it. 6 words that hung in the air heavier than any silence. Imagine for a second. You're on a date. Someone expects you to order, to enjoy, to look comfortable, and you admit right there that you don't have the money for even the simplest thing on the menu. That's not just honesty. That's vulnerability. Most people would freeze. Some would feel awkward. Others might judge. But what he did next set the tone for everything that followed. He smiled, looked at her straight in the eyes and said, "Then I'll order 2. No hesitation, no pity, just warmth. And in that moment, the power dynamic flipped. What could have been a humiliating admission turned into a shared experience. And here's where the story opens up, because this wasn't just about 2 cups of coffee. It was about what that coffee represented. For her, it was about shame. For him, it was about reassurance. For the little girl sitting at the table, quietly watching, it was a lesson that kindness doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it just looks like a man ordering 2 coffees without making the other person feel small. But let's back up for a moment. Why would someone show up to a blind date unable to afford coffee in the first place? This is where the challenge comes in. Life isn't always fair. She had been through layoffs, part-time jobs that barely covered rent, and the kind of financial stress that keeps you up at night counting coins. Instead of sheep, she almost didn't go on the date at all, but something in her told her to show up, even if she had nothing to bring to the table except honesty. And honesty, as it turns out, was the very thing that made her unforgettable. The man, by the way, wasn't just any man. He was a CEO, a single father, someone who lived in a world where money solved most problems. Yet he wasn't looking for someone who could match him financially. He was looking for someone who could match him in heart. This is where the story deepens. As they talked, he didn't once make her feel lesser. He didn't flaunt his success. Instead, he asked about her dreams, her struggles, and her plans for the future. He leaned in when she spoke, even though her words were quiet, unsure. And each time she stumbled, he gave her that same smile he had when he ordered the coffees, steady, unshaken, present. The daughter, curious but polite, eventually chimed in too. She asked the woman about her favorite colors, her favorite animals. Simple questions. And the woman, perhaps for the first time that day, relaxed. She laughed. She answered with sparkles in her eyes. That's when the man noticed it wasn't that she lacked confidence. It was that life had beaten it out of her. And that's the problem so many people face, isn't it? Not just financial struggle, but the feeling that struggle defines you, that you aren't allowed joy or dignity, or love until you fix yourself financially. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes love doesn't wait for you to be perfect. As the date went on, the awkwardness melted. The cafe filled with the scent of roasted beans and pastries, and outside people hurried through the cold. But inside, at that table, 3 lives were quietly intersecting in a way that would never be the same again. The climax came not in some dramatic confession, but in something much smaller. When the waitress came back with the coffees, he slid 1 cup in front of her and said, "This isn't about money. This is about time, and I want to spend mine with you. That broke her. Not in a bad way. In the way walls finally crack and let light in, she took a sip, held the warm cup close, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was failing. She felt seen, and in that feeling something new was born. Now whether this story ends in marriage, friendship, or just a lesson is up to interpretation. But what matters is the takeaway. Sometimes honesty is more powerful than any mask you wear. Sometimes kindness is as simple as a smile and a cup of coffee. And sometimes, the most valuable thing you can give someone isn't money, it's dignity. The single dad taught his daughter something priceless that day: how to treat people with respect, no matter their circumstances. And the woman, by admitting her truth, discovered that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the doorway to real connection. So the next time you think you need to have it all figured out before you show up, remember this story. Because maybe, just maybe, what someone's looking for isn't your wallet but your heart. If you found this story moving, watch the next video on your screen. You don't want to miss it.